looking for the perfect realtor to guide you through your next home buying experience? Maybe you need to list a property. Tuesday Reynolds is the one you dial up. Leave the hassle to a trusted expert who cares. Whether you're a family of four moving into a new neighborhood or a first-time buyer not knowing where to start, Tuesday has you covered any day of the week. Call Wallace Real Estate on Peters Road at 865-693-1111 and ask for Tuesday Reynolds or dial 276-525-5205. And we are back with Fanrun Varsity Spotlight. It is week 1, and our very special featured guest for week 1 is none other than head coach of the Powell Panthers, Matt Lowe. Coach, thanks for joining us. How you doing?
I'm doing good, brother. Excited to get this season started, and I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. Let's get right to it. How do you feel coming out of fall camp? You guys have a few scrimmages under your belt, and of course the jamboree that took place this past weekend.
We are excited. The number one thing that every coach hopes going into week 1 is that you're healthy. And so for the most part, right now we're healthy, and so hopefully it can stay that way for a while. That's always your biggest fear during the early preseason type stuff is, any of those injuries that kind of jump up. And so, luckily, knock on wood, we were able to kind of escape that. And we're going to at least roll into week 1 with all of our guys. And, at the high school level, everybody's concerned about depth. The number 2 never looks like the number 1. There's a reason he's the number 1. And so, you just hope that you can go out there with all your guys ready to go on that first Friday. And then you'll see how it kind of plays out from there.
Speaking of the ones, you guys lost a lot of production from the 23 class that graduated, and that's going to be a question that a lot of folks are going to have, particularly at the skill position and the quarterback position. What are some of the names that some folks can get familiar with tearing up that field over at Scarborough?
It is going to be different, and like you said, we lost a lot of talent that's going to be playing on Saturdays. And so, you can't replace those 3-4 year starters in week 1. It's going to take some of these new guys a chance to kind of get their feet underneath them. But luckily, they've got a great supporting cast around them. Our defense is as good as it's been in a long time. And our offensive line, and obviously, the headliners offensively is going to be Connor Wheeler. He's running behind 4 returning starters. Most of them have been starting since they were sophomores up front. So Connor Wheeler is certainly going to drive the engine here early on. Deuce Rogers has put himself in position to start game 1 at quarterback, and he's made some plays over this preseason that have us excited, not only about, him going into the season, but certainly about his longevity, at the quarterback position. And Dylan Stooksbury's really kind of come into his own as a wide receiver. He was an all-state kicker as a freshman, was really that rotation guy. Anytime Green or Redmond needed a blow last year at receiver, ended up starting a couple of games at quarterback for us. Now we've let him just kind of settle in, not only as hopefully, another all-star type kicker, but now he's going to be one of those primary receivers as well, filling those big voids and those big shoes left by some of the guys you had already talked about. And so, we think that's going to happen. We think Adam Weaver's continued to have a good preseason, and we expect big things out of him. And, and then you've got a couple of seniors there on the inside with Trevor Bryant, who started 4 or 5 games for us last year in the slot. And then Matthew Clayton and Weston Williams, who are a couple of hybrid guys that'll, kind of play a receiver or tight end H-back type role for us. And we're excited about those guys because we really haven't had that position the last couple of years. And now there's a couple of guys there that can certainly seem, at least during the early season, get it done.
You mentioned Stooks and his versatility. How has he been able to balance his role, even going back to his freshman year? Like you said, he's kicked for you. He's spelled at receiver, even played quarterback for you guys. How has he been able to balance that plug and play, that versatility?
It all starts with the fact that he is a great athlete. He's also a starter on the basketball team and does extremely well there. So, he has a natural skill set that allows him to just, in a lot of situations, go out and play. And so as a kicker, which is where, I certainly believe his future is, I think he is a college level kicker and somebody's going to snatch him up pretty quickly. But he's also an extremely gifted athlete to go along with being a really good kicker. And so, he naturally was the quarterback, but, we didn't want to waste him. So we were training him at wide receiver also. Then when the injury early on happened last year, we threw it at him, and, he handled it well. That's a tough spot to be in with all the expectations, and anybody who's following up Jordan Potts or has to come in relief of Jordan Potts, he handled that situation with a lot of grace and a lot of maturity and handled it well until Jordan returned. And then, you could tell that the weight was off of him. He could go back to being a kicker and a receiver. And coming out of this spring, him and Deuce really went through it this spring, both of them playing quarterback. And we certainly felt like what was best for our team is to have both of them on the field at the same time. And so when he and I had the conversation that I'd planned to move him permanently to wide receiver and just let him focus on kicking and being a wide receiver, I think the young man was certainly excited. I think that's where he naturally wants to be. I think that's how he wants to help the team win. That those are the areas that he enjoys doing the most. And so I think it's just a great fit for us, but we've got high expectations for him, and we expect him to have a big year for us.
You mentioned the defense being a strength, and then the experience that you guys have on the offensive line. Is that something coming in as a coach? If you're going to lose what you lost, because I mean, look, it's the list of production and the numbers. Magdos, Faust, Green, Redmond, and a 3-year starter at QB that's one of the best quarterbacks to ever come through Knox County. If you're going to lose that those names and numbers make a CVS receipt look irrelevant. So if you're
don't talk too much about that, man. It'll start to remind me of the number of yards that those 5 individuals had over the last 4 years.
Yeah, it's insane. And I was glad that I got to see that up close many times. But if you're in your seat and you're walking into a new season, is there some reprieve to say, you know what, it starts and ends with the line play on the defense and offensive side of the ball?
I've made this statement many times with anybody in the media or journalists or especially sports people right before kickoff, when they always ask, what's going to determine who wins or loses this football game. At the high school level, especially, maybe at every level, it always starts up front. Whoever wins the line of scrimmage traditionally has the greatest chance of winning the game, whether you're talking about offense or defense. So for us rolling into this year, the fact that we have, 3 guys on our offensive line that have started 30-plus ball games. The fact that the 4th one started every game last year. And so, we've got experience up front. Those guys know how to communicate. They know how to talk. They know how to combo. They know how to work together. The fact that behind them is last year as a sophomore was the prep extra or whatever it was, 5-star preps, sophomore of the year. He was an all-state kid. We know that's who we are right now. We're going to look very different than Jordan Potts and Green and Redmond and Faust. We're going to look different than the air show that's been happening the last few years. But that will come. That will come somewhere down the line when these young guys and these new starters get going. But for us to be able to rely on those guys up front is a great asset to us. Then you turn around from there, and we've got 7 returning starters in the box on the defensive side of the football. We've only got 1 guy in the secondary. So some of those young guys got to grow up in the secondary. There's talent there. They just don't have experience. But in the box up front, whether you're talking about the defensive line or the linebackers, there's not only talent, but there's experience to go along with it. And, what a blessing we are to lose what we lost, but still have the team that we still have going into 23.
You mentioned the 1 guy in the defensive backfield. I'm guessing that'd be Marcus Jackson.
That's exactly right. Yeah, he started every game for us last year at corner, and right now we're putting a lot on him that he's got to lead that group, again, of talented young kids, but still very inexperienced young kids.
What's his progression been like? Because, last year, last year you were having to deal with, you had all the crazy athletes at the skill, sometimes having to play 2-way. But this time last year, you were trying to figure out how to replace Owen Peterson and Carson Whitehead, and I think that was understated last year. But now it's a whole new group. But you've got that one common denominator in Marcus Jackson, who had a lot of tough assignments last year. And,
he did.
And he kind of came into his own. What's his progression been like?
And he's taking on that leadership role, and he's taking it. We get after him. We don't get after those young guys nearly the way we get after to the experienced guys. We've put a lot on Marcus. Our expectations for Marcus are extremely high. Last year we put him in a lot of tough spots because he was our man-to-man guy. A lot of times in the things that we do and the game plans that we put together, if we have a guy that was going to play somebody man-to-man, that was Marcus last year. This year, his role might be a little different. Now we need him to be the communicator. Now we need him to be the guy that's making sure everybody else is lined up correctly. They understand the coverage and they understand the technique within that coverage. And so, his roles really changed. Last year, he was the new starter back there. So therefore, we tried to keep it simple with him a lot of times and just let him be the man-to-man guy. This year, those roles are going to change a little bit. And so he's got to take on a lot of that ownership. He's got to take on a lot of making sure that communication is good on the back end and make sure those young kids know exactly what we're running and where they should be.
Gonna go back to Connor Wheeler because, man, just to think about the number of snaps and touches he has had early on in his career. His freshman season, he was, speaking of tough assignments, Connor had tough assignments into the defensive backfield as a freshman. And then he comes in his sophomore year as your featured back in that high-profile offense. What has it been like to watch his development and have his roles changed? And then not to mention the production that he had last year, his sophomore season.
And it is. It's so much fun to watch kids, and especially, as they mature and as they get older and as they become a bigger part. As a freshman, we knew he was extremely athletic coming into high school, but we certainly didn't know that he was going to, in the 3 weeks prior to the start of the season, that he was going to clamp down a starting corner spot on that 21 state title team. And all he did was start 15 straight games as a cornerback and be one of the 2 punt returners and kick returners on that unit. And so we obviously were excited as he was coming back as a sophomore. We knew his role was going to get a lot bigger running the football, but we had no idea that he was going to explode the way he exploded. And what an unbelievable compliment he was to all of that passing attack that you just talked about with the experience we had at receiver and quarterback. What a compliment he really was. And it was amazing how some Friday nights he really stole the show. With all the talent that was on the field, there wasn't a lot of people who walked out of the stadium who didn't think he might have been the best player out there. And so, we're excited about him. We're probably going to limit him a little more defensively this year than we have in the past, at least till the second half of the year and as we get into playoffs. And, but that's not uncommon. Those are the things you do, when you have some guys, and especially when we have some young talent over there at defensive back. Let's find out what these guys can do the first half of the year. So now we know exactly what we have heading into the second half.
Let's talk about Steven Souls for a second. And I don't know where to begin because the dude's from another planet. The recent Kentucky commit, and we all knew it was coming, that he is a D1 player, a Saturday player with his future sights are far beyond, the NCAA. I mean, he's headed for the league. What's it been like watching that kind of talent? I mean, you guys, he can play with his hand in his dirt. He can play standing up, but when he's on that line, I mean, is that the quickest release you've seen with that type of player, that size, that you've seen?
It is, and obviously going into his senior year, he's drawing so many comparisons to what Walter Nolan did when he was here. But him and Walter were such completely different body types and completely different type athletes. Walt, was your 6'3", 6'4", 330-pound guy that was an interior that could move and be athletic. Steven is one of the overall best athletes that I've ever had on my roster. In 20 years of doing this, athletically, he might have the best standing broad jump of any of the kids that I have ever coached. I mean, he can absolute jump out of the gym. His takeoff, his 10-yard split is unreal. And so his explosion off the football is what sets up everything that comes after that. But the other thing that I tell people constantly when they ask me, hey, describe Steven Souls, I don't know that there's another player in Knoxville or maybe the state that enjoys Friday nights the way that kid enjoys Friday nights. He is 100 miles an hour the entire time. He has more fun out there on a Friday night, just running around, chasing people, trying to hit who he can. Hopefully they have the ball, but if they don't, he's okay with that. He's just running around like a kid, having fun playing this game. And he is contagious to everybody else because the energy and the excitement he brings, everybody else feeds off of that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that after his sophomore season, I think he had the school record for sacks just after his sophomore season.
He had 5. He had 5 as a freshman. He and Walter both had 17 Steven's sophomore year, which put Steven at 22, which was the all-time sack record at 22 for the career sack record at Powell High School. He then tacked on another 16 last year. So he is currently at 38 going into his senior year, and I can't wait to see the guy who can actually try and have a chance to catch him.
I was going to say, are you guys just going to reset the record books after this season for that category?
Right. Prior to the last 3 years, prior to Souls and Walter Nolan, the single season, I think, was at 12 or 13, and the career was only at like 18 or 19. And so these guys have really, and Steven in particular, has completely rewritten the record book. Last year, as a defensive lineman, he had 135 total hits. And that just doesn't happen for defensive linemen. That tells you about the type of athlete that you're really dealing with and the energy that he plays with. The fact that he never gives up on a play, and some of those hits are occurring down the field as a backside defender just chasing it down.
Speaking of etching your name in folklore surrounding high school football, let's talk about the Lowe Legacy. Anyone that knows you knows that the way you operate is rooted in your family, in particularly your father. And one of the coolest things I've ever seen, the state championship parade, the Powell parade after the state championship, when the students and the band were turning off Emory Road, coming beside the school, about to go out onto the field. Everyone kind of stopped for a second to get lined up. You called your pops over and kind of embraced with him and had him lead the charge. What was that moment like for you and ultimately not just the family, but the community?
Well, I mean, obviously me and my father have a special bond. He played at Powell, graduated. I believe he was a 70 or 71 graduate and played at Powell. And I grew up in the community. Not only did I grow up in the community, my dad was the Powell Youth Football Commissioner for like 9 years. My mom was the Powell Cheerleading Commissioner for like 13 years. So I literally grew up at Levi Park being around the game of football my entire life. And so it is all I'd ever known. It is all we had ever really known as a family. And so, we didn't eat dinner at any time during my childhood until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, because that's what time we got home and got done doing everything. And so, obviously to be a part of what those young people did and to be in my spot to win that state championship was unreal. But so much of me personally, I felt like, what had been accomplished was for a lot of other people. Particularly, for me personally, it was for my dad. They gave me that state championship coach's plaque. That thing didn't make it a couple of days at my house. It's been hanging at my father's living room since then. That plaque was for him. He's the one who put this passion inside of me. He's the one who taught me the game. He's the one who did all those things. I just got to be the beneficiary of all of the, upbringing that he allowed me to have. So it's really not a thing that, was a big humble thing. I wouldn't be who I am without him, without my entire family, without my wife and my daughters, the way they support me, certainly without my mom and dad, my sisters, and the way they've always been my biggest fans. So, for me personally, it was a lot of give back. But not only to them, but to the entire Powell community as somebody who grew up watching those games and idolizing those guys in the late 80s and early 90s, who now gets to, have the opportunity for a second time in my career to sit in the head coaching seat. It's very little to do with me, and it's a lot to do with these kids who love playing for Powell High School.
Who are some of those guys back when you were a kid that played for Powell that influenced you?
I mean, the unbelievable names are the Rudy Stinson. I mean, the only the second parade All-American in Powell High School history, behind Jim Courtney, who did it back in the 60s. And so, but the Littlejohn brothers, Preston and Jason Littlejohn, those guys were unbelievable to watch, and just to be able to, those late 80s, early 90s teams at Powell, when they were really starting to get rolling, it was unreal. Even my freshman year, when Powell finally got to go to the state championship, I was a freshman on that team, and all I really did was hold the clipboard and keep Jason Littlejohn's jacket around my shoulders until he needed it. I was perfectly fine being the backup quarterback and hoped I was never needed, because if I got called in the game, that means something happened to Jay. And I didn't want that to happen because he was that good. He was a Mr. Football finalist way back when there was only 3 of them. And so, that was the type talent and the type guys that I got to watch as I was coming into high school that really got me excited about being a high school athlete, and, that really got me excited about playing for Powell High School.
Yeah, you mentioned it. I mean, the expectations started there for you as a player in the Powell community. As you grew older through your adulthood and through your coaching roles, was there ever a question with you where you sit back and thought, will Powell ever win a state title?
Yeah, I don't know. If you had asked me following 2011, when we were as close as we've ever come, and when bottom line, we should have won it. We had opportunities to win it and didn't. I didn't know, but I knew this. I'm a firm believer God puts us on this earth with a passion, and He also wants us to be successful. And so I don't think in anything that you do in life, you do it with a passion and you do it daily with an unbelievable drive to be highly successful at it, at any avenue. And so if you continue to do that, good things are going to continue to come your way. At some point, you will be blessed. And so, I think that's always been part of who I am. It was part of how I was raised. You continue to work hard. You would continue to push yourself to be at the top. And at some point, you're going to get there. It might not be in your timing. It might be in His timing. But at some point, you're going to get there, because those are the things that are driving you every day. And, some people choose how hard they work. Other people choose to work harder. But the harder you work, it is amazing the more opportunities that come your way.
Speaking of community, you guys start week 1 off with Anderson County. These are 2 neighboring communities. And, I've talked about it with going back to last year, Jordan Potts and Gavin No on the other side for AC. They spoke about how while this matchup may not be a rivalry per se that goes back years and years and years, there's something special about it. And especially if you go back and look at some of the outcomes from the past few years, how important is it to keep this matchup on the schedule?
Well, I think it's a no-brainer. Every year when I get to talking with Coach Gillum, when I get to talking, with those guys about the schedule, it's a no-brainer. And we always want to play it early in the year as either the first or the second game, depending on how things kind of fall with the with their setting up there in the Anderson County area. But bottom line, we're 11 miles apart. We're 2 exits apart, going right up 75. It just makes sense. And so, this is what high school football is supposed to be. You've got 2 communities who are extremely proud of their high schools and their football programs. Let's kick off the season the way it's supposed to be kicked off, with 2 really good football teams playing each other. And now both communities, both programs, both coaching staffs, both teams can get a true evaluation of how good are we? How good can we be this year? We've just played another really good football team. Let's find out where we are, where our weaknesses are, where our strengths are, so we know how to move forward. And so I think it's one of those games, as long as Coach Gillum's up there, as long as I'm at Powell, I think we'll continue to see it. But anybody who's been around this game the last 5-6 years knows that, wow, they're in for a treat come Friday night, because somebody's going to win it, but it's probably not going to be till late in the fourth quarter. And it's going to be exciting, and there's probably going to be a lot of points.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities this year with both programs dealing with new signal callers, new skill players. Both teams are going to look a lot different. But on your side, what are you looking at going into week 1 in this matchup? This week of practice? I know it's get up and go, but what's the key focus with your team?
I know it sounds cliche, but it really doesn't change. We've got to win the line of scrimmage. Last year, everyone knows that Potts went out on play 8 and our whole team changed. But what they don't realize is they beat us at the line of scrimmage last year. Whoever wins the line of scrimmage in this matchup probably wins the game. Whether you're talking about the O-line or the D-line, whoever establishes the run and can consistently run the football has the biggest advantage going for the entire 4 quarters. So we've got to be able to win the line of scrimmage. We've got to be able to stop them from what they are capable of doing. And Moog is one heck of a tailback coming back. We know they're going to be big and physical up front. They're always that. So we've got to win the line of scrimmage with our defensive front. And then we have to establish the line of scrimmage as an offense. We have to find holes for Connor Wheeler to run through. We've got to find ways to protect the quarterback when we need to throw it. But we've got to be able to win at the line of scrimmage. And whichever side does that probably wins the game.
Coach, you always have a nice lineup to roll out, and going to get into this segment real quick before we let you go. Another establishment in Powell that always has a nice rotation, a nice lineup is Crumble Cookies, and I want you to help me out to call a play here. What play are we going with? They've got 6 cookies to choose from, and man, this past week they had semi-sweet chocolate chunk, Kentucky butter cake, pink donut, Buckeye brownie, vanilla crumb cake, or lemon bar. What are you rolling out with, Coach?
That sounds like a whole batch of delicious right there. I don't know what the pink one was that you said, but I think I'm probably going to try that.
Well, I know you like donuts, so that just
well,
makes
I'm
sense,
a big fan of donuts. I'm a big fan of pretty much anything sweet. I'm weird that I'm not a huge chocolate guy, but I love just pure sugar, whether it's Mountain Dew or whether it's candy or whether it's donuts. I live on sugar nonstop. But the fact that I also live with nothing but females at my house with my 3 daughters and my wife, we eat a lot of pink stuff. We eat a lot of sugary treats. So I'm probably going with the pink one.
Hats off to you, man. That's a tough assignment. Hey, and speaking of Crumble Cookies, I mentioned the one in Powell on Clinton Highway. Folks, if you're going to go out to the game this week against Anderson County and you need a late night pick-me-up, Crumble Cookies is open till midnight on Fridays and Saturdays, so it's the perfect option. If you're leaving the game, you're out on Friday night, and you need to fulfill that sweet tooth craving, Crumble Cookies is the spot to go. Also, check out the location on Parkside Drive, and then we also have our friends have a brand new location out in Maryville. Coach, I want to thank you for hopping on, man. I'm real excited. It's going to be a new look, like you said, but hey, it's more room and more real estate for these kids to cover and to maybe catch up on some of those crazy record book numbers that we've seen in the past. Any parting thoughts before we let you hop off here and get going in week 1?
Just excited to get to week 1. Excited to find out who these kids are and who's ready to step up and be that next household name that everybody in the Powell community is talking about. Those are always fun things for me as a coach to watch when the lights come on, who's ready to make that jump and be that guy.
Absolutely, Coach. We'll let you get after it. Appreciate the time. Thanks for hopping on, and we will definitely catch up with you soon.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Coach.
You got it, man. That was great.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it, and I'll be seeing you later on in the week.
You got it, man. Hit me up.
Yeah, I will.
All right. See you, buddy.
See you.